Hello.
Hi, Barry. How are you?
I'm hanging in for an old guy.
Yeah. Some of us don't think you're that old.
It's amazing how our conception of age varies as we
Yeah,
age as
exactly.
well.
Only because I'm ambulatory, that's all.
How's everyone this evening?
Good.
Hi, Dave.
Cam, in 10 words or less, how was the trip?
You talking to me?
Yes. Didn't
It was absolutely fantastic. It was just amazing. We had such luck with the weather. Typically Patagonia at this time of year has really strong winds and it's often blows for days at 70 miles an hour. And we had no wind and we had blue skies the whole time. And the views are just spectacular. And the wildlife is also spectacular. We even saw a panther. So that's my
Oh,
10
wow.
words.
That's neat. Oh, terrific. Well, unfortunately, the winds that you were missing, I think, hit Southern California. So,
Yes, unfortunately.
yeah.
So did you go swimming in the Straits of Magellan?
No, it was a little bit chilly.
Does anybody ever do that?
Uh, I,
I can't
I,
imagine.
I guess, well, there's a lot of people that have unintentionally gone swimming. There are over 800 ships have sunk
Yeah,
on that
right.
one.
I think we have a quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and start us because we have a lot to get through. So, welcome everybody. Let me go ahead and take a roll call. So, Nina,
Here.
Cam,
Here,
Sarah,
I'm here.
here, Marty,
Here.
and Mish,
Here.
and I'm here. Great. So I'm going to defer the minutes until after we go through the budget. So, Michael, why don't we go ahead and start since you obviously have the greatest amount to get through.
Not
Thank
really.
you. Yes. And I think Robin's going to open us up, but yes, we'll try. I tried to keep it as minimal as possible because I feel like last time was a great meeting, but I definitely heard the music playing as we got towards the end. So, hopefully we'll be a little faster for you, and appreciate Robin and Carl being here to help kick it off and to answer questions when we go through it. So, Robin, do you want to kick it
Sure.
off?
Sure. I want to sort of lay the foundation for what this budget is that we're about to present. So we view what we're about to present tonight as the high watermark of where the spending is going to be. Incorporated in this budget are all of the asks. Some of the items in the budget are placeholders, so they're really our best estimate as of today. But we felt it was important to put everything in that we knew about. We also, with respect to this budget, have not taken into consideration any sources of funding. We just wanted to present this budget to you as is, as the high watermark. We also wanted to make sure on the revenue side that we maintained what has been the town's philosophy over the last 3 to 5 years, which has really been not to maximize the levy capacity, because by maximizing the levy capacity, we would actually spike the tax rate. So when looking at the revenue side of the equation, it is extremely conservative. It again leaves the cushion that we had last year, or the excess capacity under the tax levy in place. So I just want to caution everybody that this is the high watermark. It's a starting point. I think it gives a good perspective with respect to, you know, what's being asked for, and lays sort of the groundwork for you as a committee when you start reviewing some of the departmental budgets. This number will come down. It always does, but there is a starting point, and we're viewing this as the beginning of a conversation. And what we would like the takeaways to be this evening is for us just to discuss some of the next steps that, you know, we will all be looking to do as we refine this budget. I mean, we really haven't had an opportunity ourselves to spend a lot of time digging into some of the numbers. So there could be assumptions that aren't right, but you have to start somewhere. So this is it. And I really thank Mike and Carl for pulling this together this evening.
Great. So I will share my screen. Woody, I noticed Janet's in the attendees.
Oh, she is. Okay, thank you.
You want to move over?
Yep. Thank you, Michael.
Yep, absolutely. Can you see the full screen?
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
looks good.
Oh, good.
They're not showing any numbers yet. It looks
Not yet, not yet. So as Robin mentioned, you know, really we're trying to set the stage for your review and discussion process over the next couple months. A special thanks to Carl. Carl is you know is part-time, but I feel like he's worked full-time this week. He came in on his day off to help get this squared away today, so I really appreciate his help, and also Mona in our office who collects a lot of these. So I really appreciate their assistance in getting this done. So we're just going to kind of hit this piece by piece. So I know when I talked to you last week, I said we start with the revenue. We're going to end with the revenue for tonight. So first I was going to start with expenditures, so our operating budget. So right now we're looking at a 3.5% increase over last year in our version 1 budget. Just to give perspective, when I was here at this time last year, we were at 10%. So we're already in a much better spot than we may have anticipated. You know, generally, you know, I think ballpark, you know, 3.5% is where we want to be. So again, you know, we still have vetting to do here. We'll talk about some of that later, but this is our starting point. So I think we're in a relatively good point here. I did want to talk through some of what is driving the increases. So certainly just normal, you know, salary increases. You know, some expenses have gone up, and in order to provide level services, we adjust those. But specific new asks, the selectmen's budget does have a new position. I don't know if this is the final name. Right now, we're calling it a management analyst. One of the things we heard a lot from this committee in discussions with Woody and Marty, ZBA, Capital with Barry, even with our town report committee, is there's a need for staff help. And, you know, for many, many years, we had amazing volunteers like yourself, but who often put in almost full-time hours during budget season. And that's difficult to ask. And so, you know, we're looking to put in a position that could help catch a lot of those needs. And we also have needs within the townhouse. You know, someone joked, I said, we don't have a bench. We actually currently don't even have a full team. We're working really hard on that to field a team, but we don't really have a bench to help pick up the things get dropped. You know, in last year's budget, we cut the municipal project manager position as well as an IT position. And so we don't have anybody doing those tasks. So this position we kind of view as a catch-all. And again, we can get more into this as we come back and talk to you about the specific budgets, but that is one ask. Public Works is asking for a full-time town engineer position. Right now, we do have a part-time position. However, that person has indicated they will be leaving, retiring. I think it might be a second retirement. And, you know, given the work that's going on in town, our new stormwater bylaw regulations, The amount of money we spend on consulting for engineering services, we've reached that tipping point where it just makes sense to bring on a full-time person. So that cost is offset by the part-time salary, but that would be a new full-time position that's in the current budget. You may recall last year, DPW started the first of what we consider a multi-year ask for additional money for paving. The initial request last year was 50,000. It's the same this year. At the end, what was actually appropriated last year was $25,000. But the idea is to build up the money that we are spending to maintain our roads so that we can maintain them in the current condition as opposed to backsliding. COA is asking for increased hours in 2 of their existing part-time staff positions. I had some extensive conversations with the COA. This truly is a new ask and it's appropriate here, but it really is so close to actually level service. Their demand is up. In order to meet the demand, they really do need this additional hours. But we are categorizing it. Oops, sorry for that. As a new ask. If I can just get back. Sorry. The fire department and ambulance, they're 2 separate budgets, even though it's kind of one department. So the fire department is currently proposing a full-time fire chief position, as well as the expansion of on-call pay for both the fire side and the ambulance side. As you may recall, over the last few years, we've had, I see an extra period, sorry about that. We have some difficulties, particularly over the summer months, with having enough people in town to respond to emergency calls. And so there's been a successful program to roll on-call pay to keep people here to be available. They found great success in that, and they are looking to expand those programs. So you'll see increased costs in those budgets for those items. There's a small new increase in our election and registration budget, which is under the town clerk, as we anticipate additional special town meetings this year. Most certainly 1, if not 2, regarding MBTA zoning, which you've seen in the news recently. Yesterday, our neighbors in Needham. There's also a potential for some water-related special town meetings. So she has increased her budget in anticipation of that. And then the current budget also includes funding for implementation and ongoing costs for an online permitting software. That asterisk should be bigger because we are in the process of applying for a state grant, which we have had conversations with the state and have every reason to believe that we will receive grant funding to completely cover the cost for the first year. However, it's not a guarantee. And the selectmen have made this a priority over a number of years, but particularly this year's, and our goals and objectives. And they didn't want this to have to wait another year. If for some reason, the grant fell through. So we are holding this to the budget today, but we very much anticipate and are very hopeful we will be able to pull that. We should know, I believe, sometime in the month of March, I believe, if we have received that grant. So that's operating. So for capital, and again, I won't hide the big ticket number at the end, but you'll see the requests here. They vary, so highlighting the big ones, the fire and ambulance is a request for a new engine, which is really driving that number. It's 1.25 million. DPW, there's a number of truck requests, but what's really driving that number is a new fuel island at 1.5 million. And then the regional school, that number is entirely the turf, our portion of the turf field replacement, bringing us to that 5.7 number. So now, as Robin mentioned, in terms of revenues, we are assuming a 2.5% levy increase plus new growth so that we maintain the same excess levy capacities we had last year, which was 2.8 million. So this budget does that. So you'll see those numbers here. State aid is set in, or at least preliminary numbers are later this month into February. So right now we're carrying an estimate for that. For local receipts, which we talked a little bit about last week, as you recall, motor vehicle excise, permit license fees. We generally conservatively use a 5-year average as opposed to a 3. And so that's the number we're holding for that. To Robin's point, there is a small amount of some free cash use in here, and only because Board of Selectmen passed, and I think probably current, even though we can't buy them, have committed to 2 things. So one is $270,000 to offset the community center debt. So that we did include that because that was a commitment that was made, as well as the free cash plan called for $400,000 to reduce the tax rate. So we did include those numbers here, and there's also $100,000 in overlay surplus to be released. So that's that 770 number. So right now, we are showing that limited use of free cash. So what you'll see here is a revenue change of minus 4.9%. We will talk more about that in another slide, as the use of free cash is one of the levers we have that we can pull to help address some of the budget gap. As Robin mentioned, we're talking about the high water mark. So the next slide, I think we're calling the hair on fire slide, but we will quickly transition into what are the options we have and some of the levers that we can pull. So in summary here, you'll see our revenue. You'll see the different pieces that make up our expenses for a total of 53.8. And then you'll see our difference, our deficit right now, as projected, is that $8.2 million. So that's the number that needs to be addressed.
As they say, that's the elephant in the room.
Right, there you go.
and Mike, can you go back?
Oh, yep.
Slide.
Sorry.
So just a couple of reminders for those of you that have been here before, and then for those of you that are new, and maybe you're already going to talk about this, but a couple of assumptions went into this hair on fire slide. We should have put somebody with their hair on fire. We're assuming that 100% of the capital budget gets funded using cash. So we're assuming that we're going to ask taxpayers for $5.7 million. So that's an important thing to consider here. Also, in the special articles, we continued some of our contributions to some of those reserve funds. Those, again, are nice to have items, but it does keep us on very strong footing. But in those special articles is the contribution, I believe, Mike and Carl, to the OPEB fund. So the additional contribution to that. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Right. So just a couple of things to note, and again, as we think about this, we will be discussing, what are some of the levers that we can pull to reduce that $8.2 million number.
Right. So that's my last slide. We'll get into that. So, first, obviously, vetting operating budgets. Robin said, these are the initial asks. We continue to meet with departments. Departments will be before you in February and March to present the individual budgets. So that's an opportunity to work through that and some of those, especially the new requests, and try to understand those, what's needed, what might not be needed. It's very typical at this early point. Many of our fixed cost drivers are just estimates, as Robin mentioned. So final figures will become known, as we move into the spring. And some of those can have a really large impact on the bottom line. So our health insurance rates, workers' comp, our general insurance, assessments from regional schools, things like that. Same is true for capital. So, capital budget committees is well underway in their reviews, but that will continue as we vet the individual requests, projects, equipment, etc. Again, we've said this a few times, but the unused levy capacity, again, we're assuming maintaining the existing capacity, but that's always a lever that could be pulled to address some of that gap, as well as additional use of free cash. Right now, as I mentioned, we're assuming just two pieces: the 270 for the debt increase and the 400,000 for to reduce the tax rate. For example, last year, however, we used 3.5 million in our budget. So certainly additional use there is more typical of our budget process. So that is another lever that could be pulled.
Michael, what is the town's free cash now?
Carl, do you have that in your model handy?
And this is going to be an estimate because
I
it
know.
hasn't been certified.
Yeah, just give me a minute to call up the model. We should be have our free cash certified in a little over a month.
Yeah.
But I'll give you the number we're modeling.
While Carl's looking, I'll just mention the next two. So Carl also is going to start to look through our available balances from prior capital that would be, were voted, appropriated, but not completely used. So that's another source of funding. And then, as Robin mentioned, borrowing. So our capital policy or recommendation is to borrow for capital over $1 million to leverage the debt service, to pay for those larger capital requests. You can spread the cost out over multiple years and reduce the overall effect to each individual year budget. So we have three projects, the three big items: the fire truck, the fuel island, and the turf field. That potentially that could be done, and could spread that out.
Right. We also, and we didn't have time to update it now, but we will also provide an update for you on what I like to call the earmarked free cash. So there's already free cash utilization that has been earmarked to fund some of our liabilities into the future. So when we look at free cash, we need to also revisit what are those items that have been earmarked and do they still make sense? The other thing that we'll also pull together is what our reserve balances are for the various reserve accounts that we have. So, there's still a little bit of work to do, but we wanted to make sure that tonight we could present where we are.
And just a quick question, maybe this comes further in the presentation, Michael, it's Kevin. Is there a slide that talks about the implication to what your taxes will look like under scenarios like, 1, 2, or 3 or something like that?
Well, we
So
have
we
been,
don't-
go ahead.
I was going to say, so we haven't got to that point yet. No.
We want to work through some of the scenarios and then show the impact on the tax rate.
Right.
But we do have still a bunch of work to do. So really what we're most comfortable with is the spending side that we've pulled together. We still need to take a look at the revenue side. We also need to sort of model based upon current interest rate, what the debt service would be for these items that potentially we would be raising debt for, because that debt service would then become part of, the operating budget if we do that under the tax levy. So there are a lot of different ways that we can address things, but we still need to get some additional information from from other departments so that we can refine some of our estimates, especially those on the revenue side of things.
And then I'll go back to Carl in a second to see if he has the number. But the other thing that Carl, Robin, and I talked about, and I'd like to suggest here, is to put together a small working group to work through some of these questions that could then report back to their respective boards. So, you know, staff-wise, Carl, myself, Chris, our assistant town administrator, but then, you know, a representative of the warrant committee, capital, and the board of selectmen. So we could do kind of more informal work offline, and then each of those members could report back to their committees as we work through some of these questions and how we might address some of this.
So could we just recap, Michael, because it's a lot to absorb. So you're projecting that the revenue is going
Go back to the other slide.
So revenue's down by $2 million.
And that's because we really aren't using any free cash.
Okay.
It's very, very limited use in this presentation.
Okay. So in this model, the two big hits are the large capital requests and the decline in or free cash.
And the utilization, you know, right now, we basically have not earmarked any utilization of free cash.
Right.
And that's what's driving down the revenue by 2.3 million.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Other questions that people have?
Do you want me to leave this up, or do you prefer to see everybody's faces?
But definitely leave this up.
Okay.
And well, I'll ask one then. So Michael, what is not in the budget that should be in the budget? What are we not doing that we should be doing?
You mean in terms of expenditures?
Yeah, I guess. So do we need an IT person, for example, in the townhouse?
Okay, yep, understood. So this with the requests so we put all the requests in here. However, I am confident meeting with department heads, speaking with department heads, what's before you is what they consider top priority, and for lack of a better word, reasonable requests, right? Understanding we can't add every position that we think we might need. But I think for me, you know, the biggest needs that I identify are, I think we do not have any internal IT expertise. We have a great relationship with our consultant, our contractor, Retrofit. They have somebody here on site 1 day a week. They are available to remote in, you know, at all times, around the clock. So it's a really great service. But yeah, not having someone in house definitely proves difficult. You know, just give you one example. They presented us with a renewal contract. We don't have the IT expertise in house necessarily to evaluate, you know, are they making a reasonable proposal or not on their services? Now we're able to piece it together the best we can, but having someone in house, yeah, that would be a really big ask, a really big need. You know, we also, as I mentioned, you know, not having any sort of bench. I do think what is in here that is needed is that sort of extra catch-all position. But the reality is, until we're fully staffed, I don't feel comfortable or responsible coming to you and telling you, well, here's all the other positions I think we need, because I just think we don't know yet. You know, my real hope and desire is that we get to that point during this fiscal year, so that when we come to you next year, you know, I could probably better answer that question, because we actually have the staff that's on paper right now today, and then we could know, you know, what the other needs are, if any.
And then Mike, within the operating budget, we sort of had to hedge and continue to put in some amount of consulting because we don't know when we're going to when we're going to find people to hire. So
Correct.
that's the other thing. And then we also recognize there's going to be a transition phase. So we will need to keep consultants on with the new hires to transition the work. We've also found that who we attract, because we're a small town, are less experienced professionals in their field, and there is a need for us, and we're beginning to realize how grave a need this is, to have seasoned professionals mentor those people, because many of them have never been performing the job function we're asking them to perform on their own, and we just don't have a bench. And Mike, I think since he started, has only been putting fires out. So we had to make sure that we felt comfortable that we had, the additional consulting in there. We're hoping we don't have to spend it, but at this point, the job market for municipal employees is still extremely competitive, and we're having a very difficult time finding qualified candidates.
I'm sorry, Robin, is that consulting for an IT person or?
It's for various positions.
Okay.
Like right now, we have finance consultants in because we don't have a treasurer collector in place. We need help with some of the planning board things. So we have a catch-all professional budget that we would like to begin to decrease. Poor Carl, when Carl started here like 5 years ago, it was a short-term thing. He's like a permanent fixture in his retirement in the town of Dover. I don't know, maybe he just loves it, but I think maybe Carl would like a little more free time.
So then are you saying that once the positions are filled, and the handoff has been made of work, that these expenses will go down because you're now sort of double booking the time?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because as we explained to all of you last time, municipal budgets are cash based. So we have to ensure that we have funding in there for whatever happens. Also, if you recall what we talked about last week, is you can't move between salaries and expenses. So these are two different line items. So, it's a fine line, and we may find in 2 months or 3 months, we have a better feel. Maybe we got lucky and we were able to hire somebody. So then we would feel a lot more comfortable about reducing some of our asks. But again, it's not really the operating budget that's driving a lot of this 8.2 million.
So,
Yeah.
Robin, that position, Carl's position, that apparently has been an interim placeholder for 5 years, is there any expectation you'll ever fill that position?
So
And is
Mike,
it-
do you want to talk about our newest plan?
Yeah, so we've gone through a few different iterations of how to do that. Carl's just does so much; it's very difficult to fill him. So as you may recall, last year we actually proposed a full-time position as finance director. We did pull that, and what we did was we actually combined the finance director with the treasurer collector position. So we went before the personnel board, got that approved. It had advertised for that position, treasurer collector / finance director. We worked with a recruitment firm, and we've had a lot of difficulty filling that position. We've actually been out and advertised twice, as well as the recruiter doing quite a bit of headhunting, for lack of a better term. So our current plan that we've just worked through, and the personnel board just approved a job description, is to actually move the finance director responsibilities to our assistant town administrator. So it'd be a kind of a slash position, again, assistant town administrator slash finance director position. And we're now back to recruiting for a true treasurer collector position, which we've not hired yet, but have had a bit more success in terms of bringing in applicants for that straight position. So the concept there, again, as Robin mentioned, is Carl will remain to help transition his responsibilities, and again, his at this point he has all of our institutional knowledge. So transferring that to Chris Costello, who's our assistant town administrator, and then slowly phasing Carl out. As sad as I'm seeing him to go, for his sake, phasing him out so that then our employees handle that responsibility fully.
Which is why I'll ask for an analyst, though we're not quite sure what that position is because we can't expect Chris to do 100% of his job and
Yeah.
take over the responsibilities
Yeah.
of finance director. Now, for us, transferring those to Chris is a win-win because it gives Chris is fantastic. He was a real win for us bringing him over here. But giving him the finance piece is something new and is going to help him with respect to his career growth. But we would very much like to take away like some of the communication things, some of the IT things from him so that he can really focus on the finance director role as well as the assistant town administrator role.
Yeah.
So this is a win-win. We believe it's a way that we can keep Chris engaged for longer because he is really good at what he does.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're trying to make do with what you have, but I'd like to get back to the 5 years of interim role and a search that's been ongoing for 5 years with someone that is expert in the field of these.
Carl hasn't been doing the interim finance manager for 5 years. He did 2 stints as the interim town administrator because, he helped us out when Dave Ramsey first left. And then he helped us out again when Chris Dwelly left. So Carl has, and then he's stepped into the interim finance director role. So, he's been with us for 5 years, but not always in the same role.
Yeah. And I assume this person who's doing the search doesn't get paid until he finds somebody. So he clearly is making whatever efforts he can. And that's a function of the marketplace, I think is what I heard you say. But does that mean he hasn't really been, if he's kind of the leading placement person for those types of positions, he must see a big downward spiral in his revenue that he's earning from this, putting a lot of effort in for not much compensation.
He is, and I mean, his firm has been a great partner to us. We found Mike through him. He's done a bunch of other work for us, and he's very well connected in the municipal area, and he's worked really hard. There's competition. There were other larger towns that were putting in place finance directors. Dover, again, who we attract is younger, less experienced talent. And there is just not a lot available in the municipal arena. And we're competing against larger towns. And as a matter of fact, we have had to increase some of what we expected to pay for some of these roles just to try and attract better talent.
Yeah. Is there any
Yeah,
competition in that placement world for those kinds of positions?
We believe the firm we have is the best fit. And we've worked with a few others, and this firm truly has the connections, and I would say he's worked extremely hard to try and bring in qualified candidates for us.
And
Yeah,
it's,
and I've had conversations with other recruiters just casually, my other colleagues, town administrators, town managers in other communities, and this is not a Dover problem. It's a municipal Massachusetts municipal problem. And big picture, our various associations, MMA, and things like that are trying to address it. We're targeting financial courses. There's a collaboration with Suffolk University to try to take municipal employees who have an interest in finance and get them trained up, because every community is dealing with this same recruitment problem. And the communities that have good accountants or treasurer collectors, when when they go to their town manager and say, hey, listen, I applied and I got an offer, they're matching and beating offers, they don't lose them. So it's really hard right now, just across the board. So it's just to be clear, we are suffering, but it's not a Dover specific issue by any means.
I guess back to this particular schedule and the prior schedule, it shows, I don't know, 7 or 8 items that seem to be driving the increases with respect to new positions and increases in hours. Is it possible to add a column to the schedule that would talk about what does that mean in terms of dollars, if we're going to start thinking about what goes and what stays, sort of the value proposition between the cost of that and the benefit that it's going to provide if the town does it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we will absolutely do that. This is, I think, our intention here, and so I'm sorry it wasn't as detailed, it was kind of bigger picture, but we can actually start to drill down on those specific budget impacts for each of those new requests. And most departments actually, and we'll share those with you as we prepare the budget book for you, submitted specific requests that kind of outline the rationale, talk about what the increase is, and if there's any offsetting costs to help alleviate the additional burden. So we can prepare all that.
And also within the detailed model, once we get it for you, there are line items for each department, so you can see the change in each of the departments.
Right.
And then we definitely will put numbers to those big drivers.
Thanks.
And then
Absolutely.
just one clarification so I kind of understand what was just discussed. Are you saying we have a retained recruiter who for 5 years has not been able to
No.
fill an
No.
open treasury position?
No.
No.
Okay,
So,
all right.
yeah, to be clear, so using our treasurer collector as the current example, that position, has gone through transition. We had a long-term employee who left. There was an open period. We recruited. We did hire someone. Unfortunately, that didn't last very long. So now we're recruiting again. So no, it's not been vacant that whole time.
Okay.
And to be clear, Carl's title is a little misleading. Sorry, Carl, we're talking about you all night. He was brought on as a quote unquote interim or acting finance director. There was no such position. I believe it was a prior town administrator. Carl was here as acting town administrator. When the new person was hired, Chris Dwelly, he asked him to stay on, and that was kind of the title he was given. So no such vacant position as finance director existed. He just kept him on is that role to assist him. And then I did the same. Carl's been, as Rob mentioned, in terms of a mentor, and it's so valuable to me. So he's stayed on in that role. We've identified there really is a permanent need for that role. And then again, through a series of trial and error, we have our current plan, and we believe will now be successful, is to let that responsibility sit with our assistant town administrator.
Okay, thank you.
Is there ever an opportunity to, I know in the nonprofit world, for example, especially in finance positions, they're shared among multiple companies. I mean, do we ever job share amongst comparable towns I can see, or do we work with other towns on things like contract reviews, like you were mentioning with the IT position when you weren't sure the IT contract, whether it was appropriate? Is that sort of collaboration exist?
So, I mean, to some degree, towns are starting to look at things like that. Mostly, though, it's done in the areas of a real push now is public health. Sharing health agents and inspectors and things like that. I'm not aware, unless you go to Western Mass, obviously you're talking very small towns and budgets. Sometimes they do have shared. I think there's even shared town administrators and things like that. But as you get into more complex and closer to Boston, that does become very difficult to share those sort of positions. But overall, yes, I mean, people are starting to look at some regionalization efforts. One of the things we're looking at, which we'll talk about very soon, is regionalizing our dispatch. And so, combining that with the town of Westwood so that we're not each operating our own dispatch, each having to upgrade our own equipment. We can invest in one place. There's actually some grant money available. So we are looking at opportunities that do make sense to do things like that.
Michael, I know from the Capital Budget Committee that there's likely a substantial request for capital next year. Looking down the line, what are the stresses you see for the operating budget in the future? For example, we're going to be renegotiating our teachers' contracts in another year or so. Are there other things that we should be anticipating?
Yeah, so obviously because they're smaller, a smaller impact, but as we negotiate new contracts with our DPW and police, and then our insurance costs. I know Barry's on the call. There's a lot of a scare or nervousness around what those sort of rates are going to do. We're a member, for general insurance, and then also we're a member of the West Suburban Health Group for our health insurance. So they're currently undergoing a review to kind of see what our future looks like there in terms of our health insurance rates and things like that. So I really think it's those kind of fixed costs that, generally are out of our control, kind of big picture, but trying to see what we might be able to do with those costs.
Other questions for Michael or Carl or Robin? So Michael, what's the next step?
So the next step is, as Robin mentioned, here, if you don't mind, if everyone's okay, I will minimize this now. There everybody is. So we're going to continue to refine these numbers internally, and particularly as some of the assumptions come to be reality. As we get state aid numbers, as we get more into this year, our insurance numbers should start to solidify. Right now we're doing a workers' comp review, so we'll have a better sense of what that number is going to look like for insurance. And then, really trying to get prepared as possible and vetted as possible before we come before you later in February. So departments will be there. And then I think it was, I don't know if it was Kevin or Marty mentioned, we'll start to prepare and share with you the more specific line item details, and then what those specific cost drivers are, what they do to the budget, the rationales, so you have a chance to review those before the departments actually show up, but then certainly ask them questions and better understand their asks.
Right. So the next critical step, we had put together a model last year, so we will update that model and share it with you. So that model has all the line item details for all of the departments. So if you take a look at the blue book, it shows, each of the departments, the salary and expenses that is in the model. And it all rolls up into a summary. And so we'll share that with you so you can drill down, and in conjunction with what you get from the departments, you can see what makes it up. We'll also, which is one of the things we did last year, is we were able to show within that model, both in the summary and the detail, what some of the large budget drivers are. But, it's pretty clear from the summary you saw, the biggest budget driver is the capital, the 5.7 versus the 1.2 from last year. So, again, we will then run some scenarios to show, well, if we continue with the selectmen or the town's policy to bond everything over $1 million, that will reduce that 5.7 million ask down dramatically. I think it reduces it by 3.2 or 3.3 million. You know, what would the debt service be on that? And then what does that look like when we just keeping, you know, just putting the debt service into the budget? What does that do to that 8.2 million? And then we'll also update our cash reserves, our free cash. You know, we'll take a look at where we've ended up. We will take a look at what's been earmarked. So we will show you what we believe the cash free, the unencumbered free cash balance is. We'll show you what the earmarks are. We'll show you what's left over. And we can have a discussion as to whether or not what was earmarked still makes sense. So for instance, when we talked about the 270,000 for debt service, that is what the selectmen committed to the town. So when we went ahead with Carol, we committed to the town that there would be no impact on tax bills. So during the period when the Chickering school debt was declining and the debt for the new the community center was coming on board, we would use free cash to offset the difference to the taxpayers. So, you know,
Has Carl managed to find the estimate of free cash at the moment or not?
Our working estimate, Kim, right now is $7 million. And we should have
Thanks.
a final number in a little over a month.
Yep. Thank you.
Hey, Robin, can I ask a question as you go through the capital budget and you said there's, you know, items that are $1 million or more, the logical ones that would go for bonding. Do you also, or does the town typically look at the useful life of those assets and have a amortization period similar to that useful life so that you get into a rhythm of the expectation is that this asset is going to have utility to the town for that period of time, gets paid down, and whoever's here in the 10-year or 15-year period when that happens, they've cleared the decks, if you will, in terms of what was paid for that original piece of equipment.
yeah, I mean, we will definitely look at what the appropriate useful lives are, and then we will also take a look at Moody's and how that impacts the ratings and then make a recommendation. But that is definitely part of the exercise. And, you know, and just because we make it, you know, just because we have the ability to use debt, we still need to ensure that what's being requested is needed right now.
Yeah.
So, you know, that process we will still go through.
Yeah.
And then I think just to I don't know if it's put a period on what Woody's question was, or what Robert was saying, is I think that you know, I would like to, Woody, I'll reach out to you and Marty, and I'll reach out to Barry to see if we could put together a working group. You know, it would be informal, so that it's not like a posted meeting, but if one of you would volunteer, if, you know, someone from Capital, and we could kind of meet between these presentations so that, you know, you're able to update the committees and keep better up to date on the happenings, where things are at. I think that would be really helpful. And then also to get your input as we go along, I think would be really critical here. So I will continue to try to make those connections and try to get us to start meeting on that sort of basis.
Yeah, that'd be
You know,
great.
and the model has to be a living document. You know, it's going to be updated regularly, but in order not to have version control issues, we need only one. You know, we need to say that Carl is the keeper of the model, because otherwise you run into version control issues.
Yeah.
So.
All right, great. Thank you all very much. That was great. I'm sure we'll be talking more.
It actually is not nearly as bad as what I was expecting, so.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
actually
I was pleasantly
better than I
surprised
thought.
too.
I
Yeah.
am cautiously optimistic that, we will get to where we need to be and put a good strategy in place. Clearly the next few years with all the capital is really what's driving things, so.
All right, great. Well, thank you. So we have
Thank you.
two quick pieces of business. One is voting on last week's minutes. So they were distributed, and any comments, corrections that people have? If not, I'm happy to get a motion to accept them, to approve them.
I'll make a motion for acceptance of the minutes for January 8th, 2024.
Great. And a second.
Can I second it if I authored it? I don't know.
You certainly can second it.
Then
Even.
then I second the motion.
All right, Tam?
I'm going to abstain because I didn't make it to last week's meeting.
Yeah, last week. That's right. Mish,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Janet,
I apologize, but I don't have the minutes, so I'm gonna have to abstain.
all right, I will resend them to you. They should have gone out.
Okay, apologize, I
Maybe
don't see it.
something I did. And Sarah,
Yes.
great, and I'm a yes. So the last thing I wanted to do was just update people on a couple of things. One is that next week we have the Dover schools coming. Dawn and Jeff Cassidy are going to come talking about the Dover school budget. We have the regional school budget at a joint meeting with Sherburne in February, but this is to address specifically the Dover budget. So that's next Wednesday. And then I just wanted to update you with Marty on a meeting that he and I, Mark Healy, Dawn, Beth McCoy, Dan Sickle, and oh goodness, Barry, help me out. Who else was there? Kate Potter from the regional schools, and Peter Morris, who is the head of the capital budget, and Sherburne and Barry were all there for a meeting just to talk about the regional schools, talk about the town's financial situations, kind of share information and kind of try and get on the same page. I thought it was a very good discussion. It was certainly amicable. Not surprisingly, the Sherburne people still have issues around the use of E&D and the process for using E&D to fund capital. I didn't think there was a lot of disagreement about it. I think Dawn felt that she could satisfy the Sherburne request without too much challenge. Marty, disagree with me if you felt otherwise.
No, I agree with everything you said, and I think I also heard at the end that there will be another one of these scheduled in the not too distant future.
Yeah, a bunch of things were talked about, things like better communication, using the Sherburne Advisory, the Warrant Committee, Capital Budget Committees, and the school committee to communicate better with the town about what some of the issues are, knowing that the schools account for such a large percentage of the town's budget. There was some talk about what's going to be involved in the contract negotiations this cycle. Beth and Dawn pointed out that the Dover was actually in a pretty good place. Dover Sherburne was in a good place in terms of um, parental family leave issues the last cycle, but that's become a pretty contentious issue in a number of the more visible kind of teacher contract negotiations that have gone on recently. It was a big issue in Newton, for example. So we're not as far ahead as we were, and there certainly could be issues that come up around it. So I think there's a little bit of concern that the budget negotiations, the contract negotiations could be more challenging even than the last cycle.
And last time we did address many of the family leave issues, we did actually substantially increase that benefit because it was something that the educators were looking for.
And then there was some talk about the turf field request, in particular about whether there was any chance that the boosters or parents groups would have an inclination to be to help at least with the defray the cost of the turf field. I think Dawn's feeling and Mark's feeling was that it's unlikely that we're going to get any help from the boosters this time around. They last boosters funded the field 10 years ago, but with the understanding that replacement would fall on the schools. So they thought it might be hard, but they're actually happy to kind of approach the parent groups. And
yeah, I think what everybody needs to understand is it's not just replacement of the turf.
right.
So, because I was part of that, it was, you know, it was understood that the town would replace the turf, which was estimated to be somewhere around $500,000. The issue now is it seems as though it's a much larger renovation of the stadium. And
Yes.
that's what's driving the costs up to somewhere around $2 million.
And they do expect they're going to have a more complete estimate of what of what's going to be going out to bid by early mid-February. So by the time we have our joint meeting, I think there's a sense that we'll probably have a pretty firm estimate as to what the cost is that they're looking, or what the amount is that they're going to be looking for, or at least what the specifications are going to be. So it seems unlikely it's going to be a lot less than $2 million total, or $1 million for Dover, but maybe there's some wiggle room.
And we know things just don't come in below budget.
Woody,
I don't know why it is.
Woody, I'm sorry, what you're giving a summary of, like, what was the meeting you're kind of summarizing? Or
in the aftermath of the Sherburne advisory letter,
yeah,
we reached out to Mark and Beth and Dawn and suggested that we meet. And,
Yeah.
and instead of us writing a separate letter, that we actually sit and talk.
right.
We had a Zoom meeting with just Marty, Mark, Beth, Dawn, and me. And that went well, and I thought actually did accomplish something in terms of creating a kind of a stronger relationship with them.
Right. And Mark is from the town of Sherburne?
Mark is actually a Dover resident, but he's chair of the regional school committee.
Oh, so and Dawn is the
Business manager for the
right.
For the school.
Mark the parent.
Mark's a parent, but he's
Gotcha.
also,
Yeah.
But there was nobody from the Sherburne finance?
but he's a parent in Dover,
Okay.
and he's chair of the regional school committee. So
And he's also a teacher in Needham.
so we had a pretty amicable discussion. We thought it went well, and then suggested that we have a second meeting in which Sherburne Advisory and the capital budget people also attend.
Gotcha.
That happened last week.
Oh, okay.
Sherburne Library, and I think the hope is to have another meeting just before the February 12th meeting, so that we have a chance to kind of update Mark, Beth, and Dawn about the town's budgets and what our situations are. I think they're pretty aware that our capital budget is going to be a stress.
Right, right.
But I think more communication is likely to be better anyway. So
Okay.
I felt like it was a good discussion.
And then what's the big driver of the turf replacement? Has it reached its useful life? Is it?
Yeah,
Is it?
it only had a 10-year, they only have a 10-year useful life.
And
The
what
actual turf,
what year are we on?
10.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, is it? Are we just saying because it's simply 10 years we have to replace it, or I mean, geez, it looks
I
pretty
doubt
good.
it. That's a question, as part of capital budgets vetting, those questions will be asked, but
Okay,
my guess is, I haven't looked at it. But my guess is it probably needs to be replaced.
all right, looks pretty good when I
But
walk.
the other part of it is, I think, that it's the stadium that's going to be the lion's share of the cost. And
Right.
that's not under lifetime of a turf field.
And when you say stadium, I mean, we just replaced the bleacher. We have new bleachers, right?
So it's the track around, it's the actual field. So
Oh,
they're changing, from what I know is they're changing the track as well.
Okay.
and that's referred to as the stadium.
Yeah, in a sense, the stadium field, I guess.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, I don't think there is, I don't know what's in it. I have not seen the detailed requests, so.
Okay,
We'll get a chance to ask more about this at the February 12th meeting.
gotcha. Okay.
Did Dawn, or when you and Marty met with Dawn, did she mention about the circuit breaker issue that she's gonna come to us with next week? That they're going to ask Dover, or they're gonna ask us, the warrant committee to, for the first time, to take some of the circuit breaker money and move it because of some overages, there unexpected overages in the out of district placement. Did she? And so she's going to ask us about this. I don't know if people want a heads up on it or just want to let her explain it next week, or I can summarize it in a memo if you want, or whatever.
Well, I'm happy to have you write a memo. That'd be great. What I think Robin can probably, and Cam can probably correct me on this, but as I understand things, Dover budgets circuit breaker funds and puts it in the school budget
At 100%.
at 100%, and then not counting on the reimbursement from the state. When the state does reimburse us, which has been more consistent recently and typically is about 70% of the cost, that money actually funds our free cash. It's a big portion of what we generate in free cash annually. I think part of Dawn's concern is it makes the school budget look worse.
Well, she doesn't want to, they don't want to increase, they don't want to show the overage because they don't think it's an operating increase. So
That's
by
exactly
moving money from from the circuit breaker, they can sort of deal with this overage, without changing the budget.
Yeah, I mean, we're funding it.
Yeah.
The town is funding it, so but it shows up on their budget. Robin, you should correct me if I say something agreed.
So out of district placements and special education are a large piece of the budget. So we know that for out of district placements, typically we're reimbursed 70 cents on the dollar by the state. Some towns, when they fund school budgets, fund the budget with only the 30% that is the town's responsibility. So in the event of timing of a case coming into town, it sometimes leads, schools have to go and get a special appropriation to cover that. So instead of us needing that, what we've always done is funded 100% of the out of district budget. And then the schools have always returned 100% back to us. Because it's the deal we made with them. So my guess is there was some unexpected case that came in after the cutoff that the town is responsible to fund now. Probably most of it is a timing, and that's something, I'm sure Dawn will explain. So because we have this policy with the schools, rather than just using those funds, which they could actually do, they're gonna come to us and let us know how much of that free cash they need to use to cover their out-of-district budget. That was not budgeted for, basically, because they weren't aware of this.
Right. I'm just flagging it because I guess they had never done it before, so they just wanted to bring it to our attention.
Right,
We
and
had it
I know, because I've talked to Dawn and she was telling me that she hoped this wouldn't happen, but she thought it was going to happen.
So they're not suggesting a permanent change in the way they do this. They're talking about just this year.
That's my understanding, yeah.
Right, and I think we need, I think it would be helpful maybe if Dawn could maybe send something ahead of time so we could, so then that way people could try and understand, because it is complicated, and maybe then, be able to ask questions to her.
Yeah.
The Dover School Committee meeting was yesterday, and it was only half an hour, and this was the first 10 minutes of the conversation. So you could just watch the I mean,
Okay,
we
all
could
right,
ask
good
Dawn
to
to do
know.
it, but you could just go on the cable
Okay.
TV and
Okay.
watch it. She explained what she was going to come to us with
Right.
next week.
Right.
All right, great. So Miss, can you just send a reminder about where to look for the school committee?
Sure, sure.
And otherwise, we'll plan meeting next week with the Dover schools with Jeff and Dawn. So I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
great. Cam,
Aye.
Mish,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
and Sarah.
Yes.
And
Great.
Woody,
All
one
right.
last reminder, could you, amongst yourselves, figure out who you want to be on this special committee, this
Yep.
working committee for the budget? Because I think it will really help move things along with a smaller group.
Yep. All right, great.
Because it's gonna be a really fluid situation for the next few months. And I promise Carl I won't touch the budget, because last time I created a few version control issues. So.
I'm sure. All right, great. So if anybody's interested, just email me. All right, great. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks
And-
everyone.
Woody, who seconded the motion there to adjourn? I'm sorry.
Mish did.
You did. Okay, good. Thank you for the minutes. Thank you.
All
Thanks
right, good
everyone.
night.
Bye.